Welcome to the Ayurveda Talk. Tonight, we are actually going to be talking a little bit about female hormones. And, it's not just with menopause or PMS or things like that that can cause disruption. But I found it really interesting. I was doing some research for some ladies that I'm working with that are going through menopause. And it's a normal process. And the way that Ayurveda looks at it is it's normal. But I was looking at hysterectomies, like what happens when a woman has a hysterectomy. Now, years ago, some of my older clients, when they did a hysterectomy, they took everything. But today, they're really good about making sure that they leave at least one ovary so that you can have some of the natural hormones. But some of the disruptions that happen are pretty interesting in how they come to be. And I just wanted to bring some light to it. And then talk about how those hormonal imbalances show up and affect the reproductive system in PMS, in menopause, and then also when you've had a hysterectomy. So I'm going to talk about the hysterectomy first. I do have some notes here. But one of the things that we need to look at is our food. Our food industry has really kind of caused a muck in a lot of different ways. What has happened is as soon as food started getting mass produced, it's all about the bottom line, right? So it's all about the money, and they got to get that food out as quickly as possible. So what ends up happening is they shorten the growth period of time. So whatever the normal growth was for the vegetables, in the old days, you just waited for that. Not even the old days. When I was growing up, my parents had a garden. We had 2 gardens. They liked to torture us. So we had a garden in our backyard, which was huge. And then they decided, let's have a community garden as well. And so we got tortured at the community garden. You had to work in the garden all the time. But I'm very grateful that I had that experience, because one of the things that came out of that was we always had fresh food. Always. We never ate our vegetables from the store. Very rarely. Very rarely. We always had fresh food from the garden. And then my mom was actually canning. And we had lots of fruit trees in our yard. Each one of us kids, there were 6 kids in my family. Each one of us had a fruit tree. So, it's kind of exciting. You have your own fruit tree. Mine was a boring fruit tree. I had a plum tree. But, we had apricot and apples and things like that. And my mom would can. And so in the wintertime, you'd get the canned foods. And that is kind of how it went down. And it was a lot of work. It's just how it was. But the overall benefits were massive. We all grew up with healthy immune systems. We all grew up, having a lot more balance, sleeping okay, not having this chronic anxiety and things like that. So the food is produced in larger quantities in the shortest possible time, because there's a bottom line here. And that's what's going on today. And in order for them to do that, they have to do things like add chemicals and add hormones to the food to make it grow. And those growth hormones and the chemicals that are being used to produce these products and foods are basically making our food poison. Or not just poison, but it's causing lots of imbalances. So foods that are loaded with hormones and chemicals create imbalances in the body, and they affect the body's own growth and hormonal system. And the large number of hormones and chemicals used also, if you're eating animals, to fatten animals, and they are usually female hormones. So that is why women tend to see a lot more fluctuations going on in their bodies. So foods with the chemicals and hormones that are ingested, they basically cause complete havoc in the female body. So it's causing havoc in the male body too, but even more so in the female body, because they're female hormones that are typically being added. So we we have to start looking at our food. We really do. I have a very good friend who also teaches yoga. She has a student who recently, he's not from this country. He's from actually, Robin, where you just visited, one of the countries you just visited. And he has moved his entire family back to his home country because he said, everybody has gardens. Everybody eats from their own garden. There's community. Family is important. Family is put first. And that is not how we are living in the West. We desire it. I totally see that with my clients, that we really want that and we desire it. And yet, how do you do that on your own? We have to figure out how to create community. We can all start a garden. You could do hanging gardens. I have a neighbor who does not have a big yard, and he did his entire garden on his fence. And it's incredible. And it worked. It worked. He's got these big posts, and the tomato plants hang on these hooks off the post, and then they drop down. It's pretty fantastic how he figured it out. So there's always a way to have a garden. And then that way you are getting less of the hormones and the chemicals in your system. Okay. Now, when it comes to menopause, that's another issue. We've talked about menopause, but menopause is also about hormone fluctuations that causes lots of emotional imbalances, and it affects the reproductive system and the reproductive tract. And one of the things that we need to do immediately is start rejuvenating the reproductive system. What does that mean? It means you need to nourish it. You need to create stability, right? We need to have routine in how we eat. We need to eat foods that are appropriate to our physical constitution. So what's good for one person isn't necessarily good for another person. We all have a different constitution. So find out what yours is and work with your constitution appropriately. Okay, so if you are dealing with Vata, remember Vata is ether and air. Vata symptoms in menopause will oftentimes show up as anxiety, nervousness. A lot of people will have insomnia, even your Pitta individuals who have more fire in their system. So insomnia will show up for the Vata individuals, depression, and overall just anxiousness and anxiety. It's important to move it to a food and lifestyle adjustment for Vata. And you want to make sure that Vata is getting nourished, because Vata is very volatile. It's fickle. It's volatile. It's all over the place. It's like the wind. All right. So things that will help is one of the go-to herbs for all of the doshas is shatavari. It's hormone balancing for women especially. So shatavari and ashwagandha is a stabilizing herb, and saffron. And you can put those in boiled milk, and it's very supportive. Okay, Chyavanprash. If you don't know what Chyavanprash is a tonic, and you can get that at the regular Indian store. You don't need to go to a special place. They always have Chyavanprash everywhere. Fantastic. I love it. It's delicious. Tastes like a chai. And then for your Pitta people, remember you have more heat. So the heat is going to then push on your heated emotions. So anger is going to show up, irritability, impatience, and then hot flashes, which can be incredibly uncomfortable. I am having a little bit of that in my life because I'm in my 50s and I'm finally starting to go through a little bit of menopause, but it's not extreme. Like I have friends who start dripping, they soak the bed, things like that. That is a lot of heat. I don't really have that. Mine is just like, oh, I'm getting a little hot. That's what mine's like. So I'm very lucky. It's a little bit mild for me. However, if you are having any of those heat symptoms, you need to go to that Pitta reducing diet, Pitta reducing lifestyle. You got to do it. And then the herbs that are really supportive, again, shatavari, but also aloe vera and saffron. And you put it in boiled milk. So for Vata and Pitta, you could do boiled milk, never, ever kapha, okay? So let's talk about kapha symptoms are going to be more heaviness, fatigue, lethargy, and then there's a tendency towards weight gain. So if you're experiencing weight gain and also water retention, that's kapha. Kapha's showing up. And you need to work with more of a stimulating type of herb. So you're going to do guggulu. Guggulu is going to pull out excess. And then ginger and pipali, which is a pepper, they're stimulating. So that's where you would go to with kapha. So that's for a little bit of information there about menopause. Now, if you're dealing with PMS, PMS also is because of hormone fluctuations. Once again, Vata PMS is going to show up anxiety, depression, insomnia, constipation, and headaches, severe cramping, dizziness, spaciness, and fainting. Also rapid mood shifts, like boom, boom, like it just out of the blue. And then also just difficult to please, can't figure out what they want. They oftentimes will move into like feeling that they don't belong or abandoned. They might have chills, excessive thirst, dry skin, and even sometimes it can get extreme. Well, they'll move and feel suicidal. So PMS hormones can cause that in a Vata person. Okay, PMS for Pitta is going to push up on all that heat, and it's going to cause all those heat emotions to show up. Anger, irritability, being argumentative. Then some of the physical stuff is diarrhea, loose stools, fever, sweating, warmth, acne, skin rashes, lots of blood flow when you actually do have your period, excessive. And then clotting, and then also sometimes spotting. Okay, early onset of menses as well. Okay, kapha symptoms, and then we're moving on to our practice. Kapha symptoms, once again, are pushing on the heaviness, because kapha is earth and water. Earth and water are heavy. So it's going to push on that, cause more heaviness, more fatigue, more like lethargy. And then there's a tendency towards crying. I tend to cry. And being sentimental, a longing for love, and also mild flu or cold symptoms, mucus, so excessive mucus, lack of hunger, so they get appetite gets affected, nausea, swollen breasts, edema, late onset of menses, white or pale menses with clots and mucus. So kapha also, when the period does come, it can also be excessive flow, but there's a lot of it. So that's how you know it's kapha. There's more of it. Okay, so you want to really think about the food you're eating. And even if it's organic, they're still pushing that growth cycle to be shortened. So just start thinking about how can you adjust that. And the other thing too, you guys, if you have not checked out Dr. Shauna Swan and all of her research on the reproductive system around plastics, it's crazy. It's crazy the amount of plastic that is getting in our food, in our water, in everything that we're ingesting. And on average, she said, the average American is ingesting a credit card of plastic per week. Per week. That's a lot. Very disruptive and causing a lot of physical issues for people. So another thing, I want to tell you guys as much as I possibly can. Get plastic out of your life. No more plastic water bottles. I don't even do my detergent now in plastic containers. I avoid plastic as much as I can. Sometimes, you know, my shampoo is obviously coming in plastic. Until I can find a glass container, that's what I'm doing. But anything that I'm ingesting, I try to get the food not in plastic. All right? So try to do that for yourself. Every little thing we do matters. That's Ayurveda. Everything matters. It accumulates. Okay. So that's our talk for tonight. I think it's a very interesting talk. It's a combination of all the stuff that we have to deal with as women around hormones. Men go through menopause, but it's a little bit different. It shows up a little different for them, but they do have menopause. We have menopause. They have menopause. All right, let's get started with our class. Thank you guys. And if you have any more questions, please reach out to me, aspiredelements@gmail.com.